Hello teacups, what's brewing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me. So today we are looking at the third part in my three-part series on working abroad and just sharing my experience and some of the details about doing so. If you are interested in watching any of those other videos, I will have them put into a playlist on my channel and I'll try and remember to link them down below for you. Now, quite a few disclaimers on today's video, okay? Because I really feel the need to make this clear up front. Number one, I am not a financial advisor. Oh my God, I am not a financial advisor. If you have any questions, any concerns, any thoughts, if you're trying to make any big decisions based on this information, please talk to somebody who knows what they're talking about first. I have no qualification in the area. I'm speaking purely on my personal experience, and that could be wrong. So don't screw yourself over, talk to somebody who knows better. Number two, while I'm speaking on where I am at the moment, I currently work in the Middle East. I have worked in other countries, and it's really important to remember that when I talk about salary, when I talk about tax liability, when I talk about things like that, it's going to vary hugely from country to country, and even within the same country from person to person because of school and experience level. Different schools have different salary scales, as you might expect, and different levels of experience will get you better salary. Number three, I am focusing pretty much entirely from a financial viewpoint here, but the motivations of why people teach might have very little to do with finances. The motivations of why people travel to teach, maybe because they're traveling. It may be a whole combination of things. So when you're looking at the money, you're thinking, I'm ignoring a lot of the other benefits and sometimes a lot of the other liabilities in doing what I do. I'm also coming at this from the perspective of a single person with no dependents. So my money is my own to use. And people who have more responsibilities and liabilities when it comes to their finances might picture this in a different way. So basically, as a catch-all, please remember that every situation is different and every situation is subject to change. One final thing before we move on, as you may be able to guess from my accent if you're new here, I am a UK citizen, so a lot of the things I'm talking about are specific to the UK. If I know something specific to America, I will tell you, but I may not know it. I will convert when we talk about salary into pounds and US dollars, but as I say, taxes are a sticky and nuanced thing, and the liabilities you have as a person will be entirely different if you're from the US than if you're from the UK. That being said, let's get into it. I'm going to put up a question I got from Darkness Dust on my last video, just because I feel it encompasses a few of the different things a lot of people were talking about. The first one is regarding my status as a citizen of the UK. She says, as you're still a citizen of the UK, I'm assuming you pay your taxes in England, or do I have that wrong? Where you pay your taxes really depends on your status as a resident rather than a citizen. I'll always be a citizen of the UK. However, I'm a non-resident in terms of my status. Now, being a non-resident basically means that you pay the taxes you need to pay in the country you're working, and you don't pay them in the UK unless you earn money in the UK. And so that's another thing we'll get into in a minute. But generally speaking, I'm liable for taxes in the country I work in. They tend to calculate residency. How many days is it? I always get this wrong. It's either 183 or 188. Usually residency is counted just straight on how many days you're in the UK for, and I'm never in the UK for long enough. So it's either 183 or 188. It's completely escaping me at the moment. I always get the two confused. But because I spend longer than that out of the UK, I'm liable in the country that I live in. Now that can be an advantage or a disadvantage. There are countries that have quite high tax liabilities and there are countries that have quite low. So where you go, it will change every time. Hopefully your school will be transparent and helpful with you on this. But generally speaking, the only time I have to consider the UK in terms of taxes are when I'm earning any extra income based in the UK. That I still owe to the government. But how it generally works is that you declare you're working abroad and then they don't claim tax on that income if it's abroad. However, when you look at income like YouTube, for example, that for me is classified as UK income. So I still have to declare that. I have to send them a self-assessment every year. Now, theoretically, YouTube is America. So you'd say, well, that was still international income. But you have an option when you're from the UK, because YouTube could and would automatically withhold that tax, but I can declare myself a UK resident, and then they say, okay, well, you're liable for tax in the UK instead, and my tax liability is actually a little smaller that way, so that's the way I do it. But it's a little bit more complicated because of it. So the second part of this question was about pension funds, and it was asking if you're eligible as you work in so many different countries. Pensions, again, complicated things, but in terms of state pension, this is how it works in the UK. When you work in the UK, there are two of the most basic income deductions, your taxes and your national insurance. Now, your national insurance payment is what funds services in the UK. It's a little bit like Social Security in America, where it funds the payment of benefits if you ever need to be in receipt of them. It funds the National Health Service, and it helps to fund your state pension. Now, the state pension at the moment runs at about £800 a month, and someone of my age is eligible to collect it when they turn 67. Now, I do live abroad, but I want to retire someday. And when I retire, I probably want to go back to the UK. So what I do, because I don't have my wages garnished the way you would if I were working for an employer in the UK, I pay voluntary national insurance contributions to help keep funding my pension. Now, I didn't always do this because for a while I didn't think this was going to be a permanent thing, so it didn't matter. Because how pensions work, and again, this is changeable, so don't always just take my word for it, but basically with the UK, you have a working life between like start and retirement of about 51 years based on the current 67 or 68, is it? Based on the current retirement age. You have something like 51 years in which you can pay into your pension fund. And the rules at the moment are, in order to get anything at all, you have to pay in for a minimum of 10 years of that 51-year lifetime. And in order to have it funded to the max, which is the full 800 and whatever a month, you have to have paid in for 35 years. If you don't pay in for the full 35, between 10 and 35, there is a sliding scale at which the more you pay in, the more money you get, but it changes depending on your contributions. And that, in a very rough nutshell, is how pensions work. Now, I didn't really think about pensions when I was in my 20s because I didn't intend this to be my permanent career. And as I say, it comes out automatically when you work for a UK employer, so I just didn't think about it. Then when I hit my 30s and I was like, oh, this is where I'm going to go with this, I had to start thinking about voluntary contributions because I was very behind with my pension. So I have been contributing into my pension voluntarily for the past 5 or 6 years. And I have previous years where I was either between jobs and I was working in the UK, or when I was doing my master's, for example, where I have paid in full or partly into the contributions. And you have a record with the government where you can sign on online and you can see which years have been paid in full, which years have been paid partially, and which years you're missing contributions. And you have a certain amount of time in which you can go back and you can fill in those gaps if it's worth it. Now, for a lot of people, if you miss a little bit, because you pay into this your whole life, they don't need to worry about filling in those gaps because they're going to make it up later, essentially. Now, I still have time to do that. Based on my age, I still have enough years left in my working life where if I didn't pay any of those gaps back, then I could still get a fully funded pension. But because I don't know essentially how much I'm going to earn in the future, I know I'm comfortable now, but I don't know where I'll be in the future, I would rather fill in those gaps now. And that's one of my financial goals for this financial year, is to go back, and now I've finished paying my credit card, pay off some of those gaps so that I've just got a bit more breathing room there. I am planning on doing more budgeting videos on this channel in the future once I've started and I've gotten into my new job and settled into my new salary. and start getting more regular payments out. So you'll see a bit more detail on that, and you'll see me contributing during those budgeting videos. Now, what a lot of people have, as well as the state pension, is some kind of private pension. Now, a benefit of being employed in the UK, if you don't work for yourself, for example, I don't know exactly how it works if you're an employer, but as an employee, most employers are required to match your contributions into an employee pension scheme that you can then have supplemental to your state pension. Now, unfortunately, because I don't work for a UK employer, that's a benefit I've never been able to take advantage of. So for that reason, I have to be responsible for myself and I have to have a private pension. However, things get a little bit sticky there because of taxes, essentially. A lot of the UK pension plans, because it's a pension, one of the benefits is getting a tax break on it. So you don't have to be taxed on your contributions into a private pension. Now, because I'm not a resident in the UK, I have the benefit of not paying tax in the UK, but I then also can't get tax breaks in the UK. Like, you can have one or the other, you can't have both. So I've had to arrange getting an expat pension plan because otherwise I would be getting those breaks and it wouldn't be correct. Now, if your residency status has changed, and the same actually applies if you've got, what are they called? An ISA in the UK. An ISA is a special type of savings account. There's different types of them, where you can pay up to, I believe it's 20,000 a year, and it's protected from tax. It's a special kind of account. If you go from resident to non-resident, you can keep the money you've got in that account, but you can't contribute towards it while you're non-resident. And again, it's because there's a tax break to doing that. So it's just something you have to be really careful of, and just make sure you're declaring everything and your status is really clear with the tax man. So my new school actually has a financial advisor that visits 3 or 4 times a year. And what I'm probably going to do with them, I think I'm on top of it and I think I do it correctly because I've been doing this for a while, but I'm probably just going to sit down with them and say, okay, I wasn't really focused on my retirement plan before because, you know, I had consumer debt and just didn't think about it before then. I think this is correct, but is there a more efficient way I can do this? And just check in with them, which I think is always a good thing to do. If you can get financial advice from an expert, go and do it, because for the cost of doing it, it could really be to your benefit. Okay, so moving on from there, the big question that a lot of people ask is basically, how much do you make? As I said in the beginning of this video, how much you make massively varies depending on who you are and where you are. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to take my salary because that's the only one I know in detail. Now, I will give you actual numbers, I'm not just dicking you around with that, but the answer is basically less than you think, but more than you realize. And I think there's a reputation with international teaching that you get paid a huge amount of money, and it's simply not the case. Teaching isn't really a gig you get into for the cash, but what we do make has much more of an impact than if I made it elsewhere. And I'm going to give you some number sets just to illustrate this a little bit more easily, okay? Now, for the sake of this conversation, I'm going to be using my new job. So in my new job, when I convert from the local currency, currency conversion is another big thing because that can change. So these are all approximate, but I'm converting local to British, and I'll also convert local to USD, because if I convert it to British and then convert that to USD, it messes it up. Something else to keep in mind is that currently the exchange rate is really good because the world is basically melting down. So I can buy more pounds for my money. So I'm using the estimate I looked at when I got the job a few months ago, because I feel that while we're in a bit of a change at the moment, it's closer to what the regular amount would be. So for the sake of this conversation, per annum, I make about £32,000 a year, which ends up being about 38,000 USD. Now that is up slightly at the moment because exchange rates are pretty good for me, but I'm using those numbers as a base. Now, when you hear those, you might think, oh, well, that's not very much. Yeah, teachers are kind of underpaid, but I'm not going to complain about that because the real value in a lot of the salaries are not the amount you get, but the package you get with it. And this is really what I'm going to discuss here, because that's not counting any of the other motivations you might have for working abroad. Financially speaking, that's the major benefit of being here, is the package. So let's take a look. If I were earning that £32,000 in the UK, let's take a look at how that would break down. For this, I've used a tax calculator I found online at read.co.uk, and it just lets you know what your liabilities would have been and what your take-home pay would be. On 32,000, my monthly take-home pay would be about 2,099, because I would pay 324 in income tax and I would pay 244 in national insurance. Now, with my take-home pay, I would then have to pay things like my rent. I'd have to take care of my accommodation. Now, in the UK, I don't know exactly how much it would cost, but my accommodation next year is due to be a 2-bed flat with a garden space. I'm going to put a blanket of about £1,000 for the sake of the conversation, because it's easy to use, but there are additional costs to renting in the UK at least that won't be included in that money. That's literally the roof. That's the roof over your head, but things like council tax that you have to pay in the UK, you have to pay television license in the UK, there's other costs associated with it that you won't see in that number. And also my apartments tend to come furnished, which tends to be a little more expensive. So that would put my take-home pay at about 1,100 after you take care of deductions and a roof over my head. Now, the thing with the package when you tend to work abroad is that it includes accommodation. I do not pay rent for the flat I have here, and I will not be paying rent for the accommodation I have in my new job. So I don't have that as a cost, which is a huge saving to me every month. Another thing that's a little bit more difficult to figure out, but is quite easy for me, is tax liability. Depending on where you are, your taxes might be less than they are in the UK. In the UK at the moment, you have a personal allowance that goes up to, I think it's 12,750. And once you hit that allowance, you have certain tax bands you go into. Now, in different countries, I've had different tax liabilities, but one of the massive advantages of being in the Middle East is that income tax is rated at 0. So I don't have to pay income tax on my salary. It can all come back to me. So that means my take-home salary after deductions, and which is 0%, and after accommodation, which I have for free, the 2,600-ish I make a month all comes to me. So then we're looking at a completely different set of numbers. And if we try and find an equivalent salary in the UK, the picture changes a lot. Because as I said, I'm taking about 1,000 to be rent, not including the cost of living there, but just rent itself. So in order to have deductions and a roof taken care of, I would need to be earning probably about 3,600 take home in the UK. So if we go back to the tax calculator and we look at finding a take home pay that is around that amount, 61,000 a year would give me a take home pay of 3,622. And if we knocked off 1,000 for that, and for the sake of the £22, we would get somewhere closer to what the buying power of what I earn is. So I'm making a salary that's barely half of that, but I have that amount of take-home pay. And financially speaking, that is the benefit of working abroad. Now, what's included in your salary and in your work abroad package will change depending on where you are, depending on who you are, what school, what kind of job you're doing. But things like health insurance are included in my job for free, although my health insurance next year will not include dental and vision. My health insurance this year did include dental but didn't include vision. So there are variations from place to place, as I have said ad nauseum at this point. There are also different benefits in terms of bonuses and how the pay scale works. In my next job, I'm currently in the middle of the pay scale. And for the initial 2 years of my contract, because most contracts are 2 years to begin with, my pay scale will not change. But beyond the 2 years, every contract after that, if I choose to stay, will be 1 year instead of 2. And every year of those contracts, I will go up a point on the pay scale. I think the maximum is about 6. I'm in the middle of it right now. So I will see a pay increase. On top of that, and this does change a lot, I will get a bonus every year. So in Saudi Arabia, that was half a month's pay, and then they only pay it at the very end of service. So that's the payment I'm currently waiting on from my school right now, because I'm leaving Saudi in a few days. That's the lump sum payment I'm getting. It's for half a month's salary for the 3 years I've worked. Now, when I worked in China, this wasn't the case. There was no bonus system included in my contract. And in my next school, because they pay the salary in 2 parts, essentially. They have a basic and they have an additional. I get one basic portion of my salary, which works out to about half a month's salary every year, but they pay it every year instead of saving it up. So I'll get it in the following September of every year. Also, things to keep in mind in terms of money is that some places will pay you through the summer and some places won't, and some places will pay you half pay when school is not in session, and some places will pay you full. So that's all a case of your contract and looking in and negotiating and seeing what the school offers, and will form part of your thinking process when you take a job. So I think that covers pretty much everything I was asked in a general sense. If you've got any other questions, please let me know. I can't think of any right now, but I hope that's helped to clarify. And yeah, just pop a note down below and I'll take a look at it. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.